Everyone thought the billionaire's father had only 3 months left to live. The doctors had tried everything. The treatments had failed, and his condition was getting worse every day. His family began to accept the painful reality. But just when all hope seemed lost, a woman who had recently started working in the house, a quiet, humble maid, noticed something others didn't. She took a risk, started digging deeper, and uncovered a possibility no one else had considered. What she found would change everything. This wasn't just a story about illness and medicine, it became a story about sacrifice, love, and a decision that would shake an entire family to its core. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Marcus had always felt invincible. He was a billionaire who controlled powerful companies, managed hundreds of employees, and had built an empire with his own hands. But everything changed on a cold Tuesday morning. He received a call from the hospital where his elderly father had been undergoing tests. The doctor's voice was calm but direct. Marcus's father had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. Marcus stood frozen in his office, unable to speak. His father was 78 years old, and the doctors estimated he had only a few months left. That man had been his support throughout life, offering advice, love, and strength. The news hit Marcus like a wall. In that moment, he was just a son facing the loss of someone he couldn't imagine life without. As soon as Marcus gathered himself, he rushed to the hospital. He remembered all the times they had spent together, fishing on weekends, celebrating birthdays, and talking late at night. Now, everything felt like it was slipping away. The doctors explained that the cancer was already advanced and spreading quickly. Still, the family chose to fight back with every resource available. They started with aggressive chemotherapy sessions. When that didn't work, they tried immunotherapy. After that, they enrolled his father in international clinical trials. Each treatment brought a spark of hope, but every time that hope faded, when tests showed no progress, Marcus poured millions into medical research, hired specialists from different countries, and even explored experimental options. He wasn't ready to lose his father, but deep inside, he feared they were only delaying the pain, not the outcome. Marcus, already deeply affected by the death of his wife years earlier, felt that old wound reopen. His wife's passing had left him emotionally drained. Now that pain returned even stronger. He found himself sleeping in the hospital chair, holding his father's hand during the night. During the day, he rarely left the room. He shared old stories with his father, trying to bring some joy into those difficult days. He brought photo albums, played their favorite music, and even laughed with him when they recalled funny memories. But behind every smile, Marcus hid the fear that any moment could be their last. As the weeks passed, the signs of decline became more obvious. His father started having trouble eating, moving, and staying awake. The doctors did their best to manage the pain, but there was nothing more they could do to stop the disease. Marcus watched helplessly as the man who once stood so strong became weaker each day. He tried to stay positive around his father, but as soon as he stepped out of the room, the truth hit him hard. He would cry in empty hospital corridors, hiding from the nurses. He hated feeling powerless. For someone used to solving problems with money and influence, this was torture. There was nothing he could buy to save his father. He had never felt so small. When the doctors finally sat down with Marcus and told him the truth, it felt like everything stopped. There was no more treatment, no more tests. His father had only 3 months left, maybe less. Marcus was crushed. Now all he could do was wait and watch. He sat quietly in the hospital room, staring at his father, who was sleeping. The silence was heavy. Marcus didn't know how to tell his father the news. But when he finally did, the reaction surprised everyone. His father took a deep breath, looked at him, and simply said he wanted a birthday party. No drama, no tears. It had been decades since he last celebrated. He wanted music, cake, old friends, and laughter. Marcus didn't know how to react at first. It wasn't a big request, but it meant everything. Marcus nodded and promised to make it happen. That same night, he started calling people. He contacted the hospital staff. He spoke with his father's oldest friends. Everyone was shocked, but most agreed to come. Marcus hired a small event team to help organize everything within the hospital limits. They would bring in a cake, some simple decorations, and a playlist of his father's favorite songs. For the first time in weeks, Marcus saw a change in his father's face. He looked more alive, more excited. As preparations began, the entire hospital got involved. Nurses offered to help decorate. A doctor who played the guitar volunteered to perform some music. Marcus made sure every detail was handled with care. When the day finally arrived, the room was decorated with colorful banners, photos, and flowers. The guests began arriving slowly. When Marcus's father entered the room in his wheelchair, everyone stood and clapped. He looked around, smiled wide, and even let out a laugh. People hugged him, shared memories, and took pictures. The music played softly in the background. There was laughter, a few tears, but most of all, warmth. For a few hours, it didn't feel like a hospital. For Marcus, watching his father that day meant everything. All the pain and fear were still there, but they didn't take over. At one point, Marcus brought out the cake. Everyone sang. His father didn't make a wish. He just looked at Marcus and said, "Thank you." In the middle of all the sadness surrounding Marcus and his father, there was one person who never left their side, Eleanor. She had worked in the mansion for decades. Over the years, she became much more than a regular employee. After Marcus's wife died, it was Eleanor who stepped up. Now, with his father so sick, her attention shifted naturally. She started helping the old man every day. She didn't wait to be asked. She just did what needed to be done. Marcus began to notice that Elena was doing more than anyone else. Whenever the nurses left, Elena was still there. She knew how to calm his father when he got agitated. She prepared his favorite soups without asking. At night, when everyone else went home, she stayed in the hospital room, sleeping in a chair just to be close. Marcus never told her to do any of this. One night, he thanked her, and she just smiled and said, "He needs me." Eleanor's story was not something many people knew. One evening, she finally shared it. When she was young, she had a sister who was very sick. They didn't have enough money to pay for good medical care. Her sister eventually passed away. Eleanor had always blamed herself. She made a silent promise back then. If she ever had the chance to help someone again, she would never walk away. Marcus listened carefully. Suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't just kindness. It was something deeply personal to her. Marcus started seeing Elena as part of the family. That night, she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I'm ready." She was no longer just an employee. She was someone willing to give life. Eleanor walked into the hospital with test results in her bag. She asked to speak with the transplant team. She opened the envelope and calmly explained that she was a perfect match to donate part of her liver. The room went silent. The doctor read the results, then looked at her with sympathy but firmness. "I'm sorry," he said. "The law does not allow living donations unless the donor is a close blood relative or legal family." Her hope crashed instantly. When she returned to the mansion, she walked straight to her room and cried quietly. Later that night, she told Marcus everything. She explained that she had gone behind his back to see if she could donate her liver. She described how she had matched perfectly. Marcus stared at her, completely speechless. "Eleanor, no," he said firmly. "You can't even think about this." He begged her to stop. But Elena was not moved. She listened carefully, took a deep breath, and explained that she had already made her choice. "He's my family," she said quietly. "Maybe not by law, but he's family in my heart." 1 week later, she received a call from a clinic abroad. She was a perfect match. Blood type, liver function, size, everything lined up. For a few seconds, Eleanor couldn't speak. Then tears came. She now held the possibility of saving his life. Marcus had left the country for a short business trip, but Eleanor encouraged him, saying everything would be fine. Deep down, she knew this was her only chance. The moment his plane took off, she got to work. She contacted the doctor abroad. She collected the documents she had carefully prepared. They arrived at the international clinic late in the evening. The hospital staff was already waiting. Eleanor stayed by his side, answering medical questions. The doctors reminded her of the risks again. She nodded. That night, she barely slept. Before dawn, she wrote a short letter. It said only one thing: "If I don't wake up, know that your daughter said yes." At sunrise, the doctors came in and began preparations for surgery. Eleanor kissed the old man on the forehead and whispered that everything would be all right. Back in Germany, Marcus received a call. A calm voice explained that Eleanor and his father were in a hospital in another country. Both had just come out of surgery. The nurse told him that his father had received a liver transplant from Eleanor. The news hit him like a punch. His hands started shaking. He grabbed his passport and booked the next flight. When Marcus finally arrived at the clinic, a nurse led him through quiet hallways. She opened the door slowly. His father lay in a hospital bed unconscious, tubes connected to machines. Right beside him in another bed was Elena, pale still but breathing. Both of them were alive, but neither had woken up yet. Marcus walked toward the bed, speechless. He sat down in the chair between them. He held his father's hand with one and gently placed his other hand over Eleanor's. Nurses came and went quietly. Marcus stayed there for hours, watching, waiting. 2 days passed. Then on the third day, something changed. His father began to stir. Marcus stood up immediately, calling the nurse. Slowly, the old man opened his eyes fully. He looked around, confused, but awake. Then he whispered something that made Marcus smile through tears. "I want some toast." Marcus sat beside him and explained that the surgery was over. His father asked, "Where's Elena?" Marcus looked toward the other bed. "She's resting," he said softly. On the 5th day, a small miracle happened. Marcus was sitting by her bed when he felt her hand move. He called for the nurse. Slowly, Eleanor's eyelids moved. She blinked, opened her eyes, and looked around, confused. Marcus leaned in, smiling with relief. "You're back," he whispered. Then a voice came from the next bed. "My daughter is awake." Eleanor turned her head and saw him. He was pale but smiling, alive and alert. Tears welled up in her eyes. She just nodded and smiled through the pain. The room filled with emotion. Marcus stepped back, letting them see each other. They had both come through the worst. 1 year had passed since the surgery. The mansion now felt alive in every corner. It was the 79th birthday of Marcus's father. Friends and family arrived throughout the day. Marcus's father sat at the head of the table, surrounded by people who cared about him. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living. Near the kitchen, Eleanor watched everything quietly. Later in the evening, Marcus asked for everyone's attention. "A year ago, we didn't think we would reach this day," he said. "But here we are, and it's because of courage, love, and sacrifice." He looked at Eleanor when he said that. Then came the big moment, lighting the candles. Marcus's father sat up straight. He closed his eyes, made a wish, and blew out all the candles at once. Everyone clapped. As the night continued, Marcus's father moved to a quieter area. Eleanor helped him sit in a comfortable chair. Then he turned to Eleanor. His voice was soft, but everyone heard him clearly. "Now, I'm really going to live, right, my daughter?" It was a question from the heart, one last confirmation that this second chance at life was real. The room went silent. Eleanor looked into his eyes. She didn't hesitate. She stepped closer, then gently got on one knee in front of him, holding his hands. "Yes," she said with certainty, "you're going to live." The moment touched everyone around. Marcus watched the scene from across the room. For him, everything that had happened over the past year came down to this moment. In that hospital room, their bond had become unbreakable. The sacrifice had been worth it.